I don't know if you heard that sound, but that's a sound I'm trying to get rid of. I've already changed several things on the front end. I've changed the upper strut mounts, changed the steering rack, which was leaking, outer tie rods, and engine mounts. So a lot of noises did go away after fixing some of those components, but I still have an issue, and I believe it's the lower control mounts, and that's what I'm going to be changing today. I don't know if you heard that. As you kind of release the brake or put the brake on, you can hear that noise. I'll try to amplify that a little bit in the video so you can hear it. I believe those are the lower control mounts, because that's the last thing left to change other than the ball joints, which hopefully that's not a problem. So let's see what happens. Thanks for joining me on my next video. In this video, I'm going to be changing the lower control arm on a 2007 Honda Accord V6. Please subscribe to my channel, helps me make more videos. And as I mentioned, I've already changed the upper control arm recently. I have a video for that as well. This is the upper control arm. About a year or so ago, I did the struts, all 4 struts on this vehicle. I recently also replaced the steering rack or steering gear. This piece here, it was leaking, and most likely leaking inside the boots. I was always adding more power steering fluid and never saw anything leaking externally, so the old one was leaking internally. These are new tie rods, outer tie rods. I changed the link cables on the sway bar link cables. I've changed those a while ago when I did the struts. So now to remove the lower control arm, which is this piece here, there is this bolt here I need to remove. As you can see, this rubber here is in quite bad shape here. It's broken, and I'm suspecting that's what's causing my source of final noise that I'm getting on this vehicle. So I did change the three engine mounts and got rid of a lot of noise. As I started the vehicle, there would be a lot of rumble and rattle. So that's all gone after changing the engine mounts, and going up over bumps and what have you, I don't hear as much noise, and I think the only remaining noise is coming from my lower control arm here. So I need to remove this one bolt here, quite rusty. I'll put some penetrating oil on that. There's a bolt over here on this side that needs to be removed as well, as you can see right here. And I need to remove the castle nut right there that's connecting the lower bar joint to the control arm. And then as well, I need to remove the bolt that's going through the wishbone. That'll be easy because I just recently had removed that to do my upper strut mounts. Sorry, my upper control arm. So that's going to come out easily. So I'll let you know what size those are in a moment, and let's get to it. Okay, so I'm just going to spray some PB Blaster. This is the stuff I've been using for my penetrating oil, and it seems to do the trick. I haven't had any issues with it. I'm not promoting any product, just promoting what I use in terms of what works for me. So I'm just going to spray some on top of there. It's an old can, as you can see. It's not spraying as well as it should be. Okay, and try to get some on this side here. Okay, see if we can get some in there. I've got a little something underneath. I don't want to make a mess on my garage floor here, so just spraying some in there. Hopefully things will come loose. Okay, not sure if you can see that or not, but I got some of that stuff in there on the bolt. And I'll see if I can get some on the castle nut here. Alright, so let that stay for a while. As I mentioned before, I don't need to put anything on the wishbone bolt because I just recently removed it. But I will put some on the sway bar link. Okay, keep that on for a bit. And let's proceed to take those off. Okay, so that bolt down there, that's a 17 millimeter. And the bolt and nut on the wishbone is also a 17 millimeter. And the bolt over here on this end of the lower control arm, that's a 19 millimeter. Okay, so I'm going to proceed to remove those. Hopefully they come off easy. Okay, I just want to give you an update. So this bolt here surprisingly came out very well. I haven't removed it yet, but I was able to loosen it very easily using a 2-foot bar. Not a problem at all. So that's already loosened up. So that should give me no issue coming out. As I suspected, the bolt and nut on the wishbone, because I recently removed it, not an issue there to loosen it. However, this side here, I tried with my impact gun. I've got a Husky, looks like 500 foot-pounds here. Wasn't able to loosen it. However, with my 2-foot bar, I was able to break it free, and I didn't want to risk breaking the bolt. I know it's a pretty big bolt, but nonetheless, what I did is I got it to move a bit, started working it in and out, putting more penetrating oil. Then I used my gun just to go in and out a bit. Got it moving a little bit, and then I just proceeded to use my bar to continue to unscrew it more, screw it back in. So I'm just at that point right now. I'm hoping I can continue doing that. It's going to take some time. I'm just being cautious. Don't want to stress it out, and I don't want to break it. So hang tight, and I'll be right back. So I just want to show you how I'm working this in and out. So I'm just going to unloosen it a bit, then tighten it back a little bit. And I basically just repeat this over and over, going a little bit further each time. So I'm just doing this over and over. So hopefully I'll get it all out, and it will be no problem going back in. Hang tight. So I just switched over to the right side of the vehicle, started to take this apart as well. Just want to make sure if I need any bolts, if I have to cut anything, that I'm going to the dealer who wants to pick up the parts. So as I was removing, loosening this bolt here on the lower control arm, I noticed that the inner bushing over here was spinning, which indicated that the bolt was kind of seized to the bushing. I didn't have that issue on the other side. So what I ended up doing, this is using this smaller type of vice grip here, and I basically just put it in there, and I was able to hold it while I used the gun here just to create my impact gun, just to loosen it up, and it did come free from the bushing. So thankfully, otherwise I'd have no clue how I'm going to get anything in there to cut that out. Just like the other side, this bolt here, the front bolt on the lower control arm, same problem. The bolt is seized to the inner bushing. I tried the same there, where I tried to hold it with a vice grip. To no avail. It's not working for me. So basically I'm going to end up having to cut both this side out and the other side. And I did order the parts from Honda. Sadly, they're not available and they have to come in. So the car's going to have to sit for a couple of days while I wait for the parts to come in. In the meantime, I'll proceed to cut these out on both the right and left side of the vehicle, and hopefully everything else goes smooth. Stay tuned. So this is the part number of the bolts that I need to replace for both the left and right side. It's the front lower control arm bolts. That's the part number, description, and I guess list price. I've been using these Diablo metal blades. As you can see, the teeth are very fine. Don't waste your time with these. It took me about 4 blades to make this cut, and almost an hour with the saw. So what I've done is I've gone out to buy a different blade at Home Depot here. Not promoting anyone, but picked this up here. It's also a Diablo, but it's supposed to be a better blade. It's got carbide tips. As you can see, the teeth are more aggressive than the previous blade. This particular blade is referred to as the Amped, and it's supposed to give you 100 times longer lasting life. This blade was about $20 Canadian, so it's not cheap. It's quite expensive. We'll see how that goes. So I'm going to go over to the left-hand side and try to cut out that compliance bushing and bolt and see how that goes. Stay tuned. Okay, so I've been on this with that new Diablo bit carbide tip, and I've been on it for about 5 minutes. That's the cut I've got going so far. It's definitely better than the previous metal bits. However, I am finding that if I do just put a little bit of oil on the blade, it does help with the cut. Seems to keep it cool and lubricated, so it helps get the cut go a little bit quicker. So I'm going to continue and see how that goes. Okay, so once I got that cut going and I started applying a little bit of just regular motor oil on the blade, I managed to cut through it quite quickly. I'd say it took me less than 10 minutes. So definitely don't waste your time with those other metal blades. Get yourself something more aggressive, something that's got carbide tips, and that'll make your job a lot easier. So there's the cut. I know I'm not straight, but it does the trick. And now I got to work on either grinding this off here or maybe doing a cut, lifting up the control arm and doing a cut in there so I could just drop the head of the bolt out. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so the next thing I need to remove is the castle nut here on the ball joint, and there's a pin, there's a cotter pin, there's the head of the pin. So you need to remove that pin, and once you've got that out, I believe that's a size 23 millimeter socket, and using my impact gun, I'm going to remove that. Okay, so stay tuned. Okay, so after removing the cotter pin and taking my impact gun with the 23 millimeter socket to the castle nut on the lower ball joint here, I was able to take it out. This has been removed before by a mechanic because I had my CV joints replaced not too long ago, so that wasn't too bad. So now, as I mentioned before, these have been loosened up on this part of the control arm. So that's been loosened up, so I'll be able to remove that. But before I do that, I want to make sure I cut this out. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to lift this up so I can get my saw underneath there and then cut that out, and basically hopefully the bolt will drop and I can just pull out this bushing. Of course, I'll have to disconnect the lower control arm. Obviously, I'll need to disconnect the wishbone bolt here as well, so I'm going to take that out. This will come out easy because I've just done some work recently where I had to remove this, so that's not an issue. I'm hoping that with a few bangs with a sledgehammer over here, hopefully I can show you right here, that the ball joint will come loose from the lower control arm. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so I just used my jack to lift up the lower control arm, exposing the lower part of the bushing, and I'm just going to cut through that flush with the bracket. So with a little bit of oil, using the same blade I used earlier, I'm cutting at the bottom as flush as I can to the bracket, and I spent a couple minutes. I've gotten in about 1/4 of an inch here, and it seems to be going good, so I'm going to continue. Just want to show you that my cut's going well. So that cut went extremely well. As you can see, the head of the nut just dropped out, and the compliance bushing was cut right through the bolt. So now I should be able to pull the lower control arm out once I disconnect it from the ball joint and remove that one bolt down there. So in hindsight, it's better to get some good cutting blades. You don't want to waste your time with cheap cutting blades. So that Diablo carbide bit blade definitely did the trick. I was able to make those 2 cuts on this side of the bushing here quite easily. Hopefully the blade will last me for the other side as well. I did buy a spare one, but I will return it if I don't use it. So I do swear by these blades. I'm not promoting anyone. I had to pay for this. I didn't get it for free, so I'm just letting you know that it worked for me. These are hardened steel bolts and bushings, so you do want to get yourself a good blade. So now that I've got the bushing cut on the lower control arm in the front bolt, I'm going to remove the bolt here on the wishbone that's connected to the lower control arm. As I mentioned, I've removed this before, so it should come out easily. And that's just a 17 millimeter. I'm going to put a socket on this side and hold it with a socket on this side. I've already got the socket in there, and then just remove it. Okay, so I gave this quite a bit of bangs with my hammer, sledgehammer, and eventually it came loose. Just be patient. Eventually you'll get it. Just make sure you don't hit the bolt of the ball joint. You don't want to damage it. Some people put the nut back on just to protect it, just in case. As you can see, it has separated, so I'll be able to remove that now. So I just finished taking off that one bolt, and I was able to pull the lower control arm out. One important thing is to make sure that this is moving freely, and I did that before I actually cut it. So I'm able to just get a vice grip or a channel lock on that and just unscrew it. And I want to show you what you're actually cutting through. So that's how thick this is. Just give you a perspective. That red stuff is just the oil I was using when I was cutting through this. You can barely distinguish the bushing from the actual bolt, but you can see it there. It's round. Pretty much seized itself inside the bushing. and that's what you're cutting through. So quite a bit of work. The bottom one wasn't too bad because I was able to get right underneath the bushing, so I was just cutting out the bolt, as you can see here. So that was quite a quick cut. So make sure you have a good blade. Okay, before I proceed, I just cleaned up the bracket. There's a lot of grease and metal grindings, so I just cleaned it up with a rag and then put some brake cleaner there. I also cleaned this side here as well. I put some anti-seize on the lower ball joint bolt. I know that I'm going to end up having to change this sooner or later. So when I do that job, it won't be that bad. I put some anti-seize on the bolt that's going to go through the lower control arm onto here. And I did purchase a new bolt for the front lower control arm, and this is the part number. It's from Honda. It's about $9, and that's what it looks like. Exact match. So I'm going to put some anti-seize on that as well. Never know if I'll ever have to remove that in the future to do some other work. I don't want to be cutting that off as well. So let's start to put this back together. Okay, so here's the new left side lower control arm that I purchased off my buddy who sells parts, and it's a direct match with this one here. So I'm going to proceed to install this, and let's see how it goes. Okay, so I just finished putting some anti-seize. It's a copper based anti-seize that I got from local auto store. This is it, and some of them are gray. This one here is a copper color. Put some around here where the where the ball joints nut's gonna go, and as well as where the ball joint's gonna sit inside. Don't want it to seize. Did the same thing on this end here, and I did the same on this end as well. Also lubricated a little bit inside there. I know I'm going a little bit overkill and crazy, but I know it's going to happen. I'm going to end up having to take this out to change that lower ball joint, and so I'm just making sure it's going to come out when I have to do that. I just want to mention, if you're having issues removing the sway bar links from the lower control arm, depends on the type of sway bar link you have. This has already been replaced. So in this situation, I did not have a bolt, or sorry, a nut on this end. This is the right side of the vehicle. On the left side, I did have a nut, so I was able to hold it with just a wrench, and then I was able to proceed to remove the other the nut on this side. However, in this situation, some people, what they might do is they might use a vice grip to try to grip onto this end while they remove the nut from this end. Thankfully, this has been replaced not too long ago, so it wasn't too bad to do. Worst case, you have to cut these off and then basically replace them. Okay, so here I have a 6mm Allen key, and what you do is you put the Allen key inside here, hold it with a socket, and then you're able to unscrew the nut from this end. So let me demonstrate on the one that's still attached to the sway bar itself. So as I mentioned, typically there might be a nut on this end where you can hold it with a wrench and then proceed to remove the nut on this side. In my case, this side here does not have the nut. So what I did is I basically put my open end socket like so inside here, and then I basically held the bolt from spinning by using this Allen key, and I'll demonstrate that if I can get that in there. It's kind of hard to do. Okay, there you go. So basically here's your Allen socket. Hold this while you unscrew with the wrench, and that's how you remove a sway bar link. Okay, so I managed to maneuver everything in place and get the bolts through. I will say it's a bit of a challenge. What I ended up doing is trying to at least get this in and this in without aligning any bolts. And then what I did is I basically aligned this bolt. I was able to get this bolt in, and before I was able to align this one, I actually connected everything back here. I put I didn't put the link back yet before doing that, but what I did do is I did put the wishbone back, and I kind of jacked it from underneath here to try to get this to be a bit straight, and then I was able to finagle that with the help of an assistant to get the bolt to align. I checked it with a screwdriver, as you see on the floor there, made sure it was straight. Once I was able to get that in, the bolt should go in fairly nicely because before it starts to screw, it'll reach this point here. So you know that you've got it in. Make sure you don't strip it, cross thread it. So now I'm going to share with you the torque specs. So for the front lower control arm front bolt, so that's 61 pound-foot, and that's a 19 millimeter bolt. And for this lower control arm bolt, that's a 17 millimeter bolt, and it's torqued at 47 pound-foot. The wishbone bolt, which is also a 17 millimeter, the bolt and nut, that's torqued at 47 pound-foot. The sway bar link, this is torqued at 22 pounds per foot, and that's a 15 millimeter nut. That may not be the OEM. As I mentioned, these have been replaced. So whatever size that might be for OEM, make sure you use the correct one. And as I mentioned earlier on the other, when I was filming the other side, this particular link has an area here. I'm not sure if you can see it, where I can actually put a socket, an open wrench socket. And I was able to hold that while I loosened a nut on this side. So this one's a different style. As you can see, it doesn't have a spot where you would put the Allen key. It's a different design. I do prefer these over the Allen key. It's kind of hard sometimes to get an Allen key in there with all the stuff in the way of the wishbone. So for the ball joint nut, that is a 24 millimeter, and it's torqued between 58 and 65 pounds. Don't forget after torquing it to make sure the hole lines up so you can put your cotter pin back in. I suggest putting a new one. Don't unloosen to make sure the holes align. Make sure you always tighten a little bit more. So that pretty much concludes the replacement of the lower control arm. Hopefully all the noises I've been hearing are now gone since I've replaced the lower control arm. I've also replaced the steering rack, which was leaking. My link cables, my links are, sway bar links are all been replaced. My struts have been replaced. My upper control arm has been replaced. The only thing I haven't replaced is the lower ball joint. I'm hoping I don't have to do that, but if I have to do that, I've lubricated all the bolts, put anti-seize on them, so they should come out quite easily. If there's any suggestions you want to leave in the comments that might help other people tackling this job, please do so. I'm not a pro, I'm not an expert, just a DIY guy. Just likes to work on my own cars when I have some time. So I don't dedicate all my day to fixing this car. I just work on it when I have some time, and thought I'd film it just to assist people. So please comment, please share, and we're always out to help each other to do things better and save a few bucks. Until next time, thanks again. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.